briefly. We'll start with a story. So thinking about like Airbnb and thinking about its growth journey, in 2011, it's actually kind of hard to believe that no one was staying at Airbnbs. But over time, over the years, like they just had this tremendous growth up until just like 4 or 5 years later, millions of people getting stayed at Airbnb. So it's a pretty remarkable journey and like some really interesting things that you can learn from in terms of like how do they grow. And part of that is to realize one thing to realize is like when Airbnb first started, no one knew about what Airbnb was, and it was very different than it was today. And so there's this journey of like and that journey on a high level exists also on a small level for a particular person. How does a person become aware of Airbnb? How do they start to consider Airbnb? When do they convert to using Airbnb? And how do they get to like coming back to Airbnb and then advocating for Airbnb? So it's like this kind of journey. This is like one journey, and then you can even focus in just the awareness to conversion, because like growth is like first you got to get some people in the door, and then eventually you're thinking about how do you convert the people in the door to advocate for you, so you have this positive feedback loop. And so when thinking about the Airbnb journey, like I pulled this example because I think it maybe shows a type of thinking about the user, and how those users become aware and what their journey is to get to Airbnb. When Airbnb first started, who do you think was their kind of primary competitor? Maybe if you could think back, like in 2011, your Airbnb started as like trying to get people to get minimal housing when they go to an industry conference and all the hotels are booked, and like you need a place to stay on a couch. Like, what do you think? What goes on through those users? Anyone have an idea?
Well, wasn't couch surfing an app that was active like even at
Yeah,
that time?
yeah, I think so. I think couch surfing was one, and there were other kind of apps like that. Any other ideas?
This isn't quite like the just how people would get the job done. I think whatever
Mhm.
messaging apps of like using Facebook and seeing who's in the location and messaging people. I've experienced being a recipient of those can I crash messages. But I mean, I know their whole I mean it's been like Airbnb versus hotels. But I don't know if that's what you're trying to elicit.
I mean, there's a nerd famous story about how every single line or section on Craigslist is $1 billion business, or in this case, $100 billion business. So, like, ride sharing is Uber, and I need a place to stay is Airbnb, et
Mm,
cetera.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you all are exactly right. Like, today we have this picture of people Airbnb competes with hotels, but back in the day it was like these weird couch surfing apps or like Facebook messages or Craigslist. And Craigslist is the example that I wanted to focus in on because it's interesting to think that Airbnb was first competitive with Craigslist, but they thought about the user journey and how, if you're not aware of Airbnb, you might be going to Craigslist first. So how in that moment do you start to bring people's awareness of Airbnb? And so they ended up building a feature that when you create a listing on Airbnb, they say, congrats on posting your Airbnb listing. Click this button to repost that to Craigslist. We think it'll increase your earnings, and kind of meeting the user where they are to kind of get them in the door. And then they also thought about, okay, once you repost or once someone comes through Craigslist, let's get them in the Airbnb system. So they don't stay in Craigslist. How do we kind of get them to start talking to the host in Airbnb's platform and kind of get them aware of what's happening? So this is like an interesting, I think, early growth kind of tactic of really thinking about the user, their journey of like what the journey is today, and like how do you meet them where they are and with the behaviors they already have to kind of bring Airbnb into the story. And this relates to user journey mapping. So user journey mapping is like it's thinking of like a comic strip almost. And this is like an example online that I thought was also helpful to illustrate this idea of user journey mapping. And you really think about your persona. In this case, this persona is Sharon, who's like busy, has kids, and is thinking about making dinner. So it's like she finished work, she has to get dinner for her family. She's like looking for recipes online. Her a child is asking. She's like flustered, and she like looks for a 15-minute dinner on Pinterest.
Mm-hmm.
And this is again thinking about what are those user behaviors right now, and like maybe that means that I need to have an ad for this meal delivery service, planned meals or planned recipes to meet her at Pinterest. Maybe Pinterest is a place I need to be advertising or finding users. Or maybe I need to think about how do I think about how does this particular site or app make it useful for someone who has a family, and for that person to share concepts with other people who have families. So this is the idea of user journey mapping. Literally, Drodio, when you talk about tools, I think the first tool can literally be paper and pencil. You think about a person, a literal persona, and I think this is helpful to get deeply connected to the person. Like the reason you make it a comic strip and you think about drawing them is you think about them in their day-to-day, like how they move from meeting to meeting, how do they interact with tools, like what's going through their mind. And hopefully that allows you to see some insights of like, oh yeah, they might show up on mobile because they're at home and they're busy, rather than having like, the ads primarily show up on web or desktop. Any questions about this kind of user journey mapping and maybe how it relates to kind of meeting the users where they are in this like Airbnb growth story? Any questions so far?
I'm just appreciating the like simple brilliance of this. And it makes me think about a talk. I could derail us, so don't let me do that. But like a talk from the creator of the Jobs to Be Done framework on the Lenny podcast. Just about like what the kind of the stories of what is going through my life when I reach for this product, or like what causes me to move in that direction.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And the other things, so, one of the contextual things that caused me to come in and think about user journey is you were talking, you all have like your NSM number increasing. And another thing, aspect about growth, I just wanted to mention here too, was like in these instances where you see some growth or some users coming back, you want to really hone in on what's happening there and see if you can create a little positive feedback loop. And this is kind of like the growth engine that can help. And a lot of times when you think about growth engines, you think about flywheels. For the example of Airbnb, if I get more customers into Airbnb, they will book more Airbnb bookings, which will have more Airbnb listings and more opportunities for more customers to use Airbnb. So it kind of like, as you add anywhere in this cycle, as you add more stuff, it gets better. And a flywheel for Storytell might be, as more people from an organization come into Storytell, dump more information into Storytell, you get more value, which brings more people in and kind of has that flywheel effect. So I think thinking about both these like flywheels as well as kind of the user journey. Here's another graphic to show you can kind of segment out, and instead of that comic strip, like segment out when are they defining their problem, comparing, and then eventually selecting, kind of converting. So that is the short intro to user journey mapping that we'd like to do today. Any other questions? The next step, go for it.
No, super cool. One thought exercise for us to think about as Asa is teaching this to all of us is Asa has allowed us to share this publicly. We can create a smart chat for it. How could we apply what we're learning to the smart chat that we create about user journey mapping? So what would be a way to implement some user journey mapping in this resource that we are literally creating on this call to take this knowledge and explode it out of just this Zoom call for the world? Where could we meet people where they are as they're trying to learn about user journey mapping? So that would be like a meta thing that we could think about doing on this call as an exercise.
Great. All right. Well, in the next steps of diving into this part, into Storytell specifically, I think ideally we could think about our user personas and they'd be segmented. Having not, known exactly where we are in terms of user personas and segmenting and things like that, I think we can jump into some tools that Jing was showing me, and we can also the plan would be to either we can do it as a group, or if people, let's say Jody or Erica, you have a person in mind or a user persona. Erica, you mentioned like someone you're talking to, and you have a deep understanding of where they are. You can spend like the next 15 minutes thinking about how would you put that user journey together for them. Otherwise, if people want to do it kind of together, we can talk about the different tools we have on data. So here, let me pull up some links here.
And Asa, I've got a resource that I would be happy to share with us for a minute to decide if we want to leverage.
Great. Let's do that while I get.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen for a second here. So I think this is the thing that is both a wonderful opportunity and a big challenge for a company like Storytell, which is that, like Greg Brockman says, every business is a language business. There's language flows baked into every business. And so Storytell can literally help pretty much anybody who uses language, or let's call it anybody who is a knowledge worker. So the like broadest persona could be like, are you a knowledge worker? Which is like awesome and not very helpful. And so Asa, one of the things that we are testing as we start growth is to define a number of personas and think about going wide but not deep, and just try to put a lot of things out in the world and see where we get the most back. And so what we've done is we've created a list of demo personas. That list should be accessible by everybody here. I'll put it into chat, and I'll just tell you what each one has. It has a front door landing page with a specific, I'll just pull up one here to show you, a specific call to action. So like pattern hunting superpowers for product managers. So that's the front door. There's a specific landing page. So it is a smart chat for product managers landing page that has some value props that are specific to product managers and some content that's about product managers. It links into a third page, which is use cases for product managers that we're building out. And so we've done this we're doing this for a number of different personas. Sorry, there's someone vacuuming outside my door. And we are also defining a fictional character for each persona that we use Storytell to make. So this is not a real person. This is not a real bio, but we use Storytell to make these. We're making a login for each person. So we have a demo account with like product manager content that we can do demo videos of how to use Storytell as a product manager. So anyway, we've got these fictional people, we've got their use cases, we've got the personas. We're basically set up as a starting point to try putting a lot of things out into the world. So happy to pick one of these, Asa, on this call if you'd like. Maybe it's like Erica, the person you were talking to, could be an interesting place to start. I don't know, but just wanted y'all to know that this is starting to exist.
Yeah, I think this is super helpful. And then I will also share my screen. I think what we can do is we have that kind of demo, high level understanding of based on kind of talking to customers and trying to segment out into personas and some of the use cases that Rodeo mentioned. We also have, looking from the data perspective, let's say, who of our users are new and returning,